Hi, folks. Welcome to Thursday's edition of the iWrite Radio podcast videocast. I've got Jimmy Hutton with me today. Stuart's going to have a day off. I think he's scared of discussing Brexit.
That is scunnered with us too, mate.
Maybe he's just fed up with us. We're going to talk about the presser, but we are going to do a bit on Brexit today. Strangely enough, no sooner have we decided that it's time to resurrect Brexit than two or three of the serious papers have got it on their front page, although most of the papers are running with Millie Dowler.
Maddie McCann.
Oh, sorry, Maddie McCann. Millie Dowler.
Nearly.
Oops. So today's press conference, Jimmy.
Yeah, it was a strange one, wasn't it? I thought Nicola Sturgeon was kind of positive with some of the stuff that she came out with. Tried to be positive, made an interesting piece about how we're manufacturing a lot of PPE that we weren't at the start, how we've kind of created almost a small industry for ourselves, and still buying lots on the international market, obviously. But it was nice at the end as well that she also pointed out that, or in fact it was Jean Freeman that pointed out that Scotland never run out of PPE, and at points was actually supplying NHS England with stuff that we had sitting in warehouses. So there was that positivity. Unfortunately, then came the questioning.
Who was it brought that up?
I can't quite remember, mate, but it was an interesting thing that Nicola hadn't mentioned that when she was telling us about the new, there's people going to be making thousands of masks. And
it was Andy McNichol from The Sun.
Right. It's unusual for a Sun question to actually bring a decent answer from someone.
Well, it's interesting, the papers that are circling and looking for that knife thrust that'll bring back the SNP.
The Times, the Sun, the Tory Graph. I suppose it's a bit harsh to call it the Tory Graph, but there were a few that needed gently prodded and gently put back in their place today, and Nicola done quite a decent job, as she always does.
Well, the gist of it was care homes not getting tests. That's interesting because that's the NHS that are responsible for that.
Yeah, but I think there was an interesting one where we got this, what was her name? The Borders Council, what was her name? Shona the Tory, who basically made out that Jean Freeman and Nicola Sturgeon were standing in the way of everyone in Scottish care homes being tested.
Well, she stated that the quote she had was from a care home manager who stated that she'd been told that the Scottish government had categorically stated that care home staff were not to be tested.
Yeah, that's just untrue. That's just a made-up quote. I'm sorry, but I don't know if you've seen Newsnight last night, mate. They ran a fabulous piece on care homes in England. If you didn't see it, it's worth a look. It was quite a long piece, but it kind of brought it home a wee bit, just how difficult things have been. And remembering that was in a care home, or that was a charity group that run a lot of care homes, but all the figures are showing that not-for-profits care homes have actually been the best of all three. Not-for-profits have done best, then local authority, and worst have been private care homes. But the reality of testing, particularly what we've been arguing about, what the Tories are calling for in Scotland, is for everybody to be tested, even if there are no cases in care homes. Now, the staff in these places are being tested, but residents aren't. And if there's never been a case, there is that ethical argument that, you're putting them through such stress, such worry. If you go and test these vulnerable people, is it worth it? Now, we've taken the decision to say that it's not, And given that for the last few weeks, care home deaths have been consistently dropping, I think Nicola Sturgeon's got a point when she says that the measures they put in place, although they maybe were too late, are now proving effective. And this call for testing absolutely everybody and sticking, because it's a nasty test, mate. I've seen it done and it's really no pretty. That thing goes a hell of a long way into your bugle. We didn't need to be doing that. We didn't need to be putting all people through this.
Well, what really stands out to me is the point blank refusal of some of the journalists not to question within the framework of reality. It's this idea, we'll just ignore that because we need a headline.
We'll ignore that because we need to score a political point against Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP.
I was being kind there to me.
Aye. Well, mate, I've noticed that just this morning on Twitter, there are now calls for Nicola Sturgeon's daily briefing not to be broadcast because people are saying it's not worth it anymore. And I'm thinking, really? People have been given information that's helped them through this. And now the opponents, because that's where the calls are coming from, the opponents of the Scottish Government, having spent weeks trying to trip up the Scottish Government and failed, they're now going to say, get that off the telly, she's doing too well here.
I think that's the bottom line. I mean, the one that I don't think I'll ever forget is the kilt fitter woman.
Yeah.
Who fitted the kilts 2 days before the conference.
Exactly. I mean, it's the fact that wasn't questioned, the fact that ran as a story for days, and none, I mean, it was in papers, it was on TV, it was on radio, none of them put 2 and 2 together to get 4 and went, hold it, if she was fitting kilts 2 days before the conference, she couldn't have met anybody that was at the conference that had the virus. And remember as well, mate, they were busily telling you that it was because of the night conference that Scotland copped for COVID. It was ground zero, according to Ian Murray.
Yeah. Whose job is at Westminster, but doesn't seem to realise it. The other thing that, I mean, we've noticed the change this week especially, that it is back to politics.
Yeah, definitely.
And the questions, I can't remember who it was not somebody quite sensible. Oh, Libby Brooks going on about face coverings.
Yeah.
Only to be followed. I think there was another 2 questions on it. Looking for the First Minister to say, we're going to make them mandatory.
Aye, that's
another... horrified that she pointed out there would have to be exceptions, obviously, for people with asthma and breathing difficulties. Preempting the next question, which would have been, what about people with breathing difficulties? And, you know, you can see it all getting laid out in front of you. The blame game is afoot.
It certainly is, mate. I do wonder, might it be time for the Scottish Government to admit to a failing at the start of all this in that they trusted the UK government, they trusted the advice, and I think we couldn't have locked down earlier, but perhaps we could have been tighter on the transfer, for example, which was a UK-wide policy, the transfer of people from hospital to care homes. I understand absolutely why it was done, but I wonder if we could maybe just say, you know what, maybe we should have looked at that a bit closer.
Well, I think because of what was happening in Spain and Italy at the time, with the health services being overrun,
well, that was
the priority. Though once again, our press is conveniently forgetting about, even though every one of their headlines at that time was about whether the capacity of our various NHSs over Britain was capable of dealing with it.
I mean, the selective memory of the press is quite astonishing at times. Remember how they were screaming when we didn't have a Nightingale hospital. Then when we decided that we were going to do our own one at the SEC, they were so behind it, but why is it taking so long? Why is it taking so long? And then because it didn't get used, was that a waste of money? And could we have used the money elsewhere? It's incredible.
So, I mean, we're aware of it, but I'm afraid a sufficiently large number of the public only read the headline on the day.
Yeah, unfortunately.
And that is a problem. Now, we're going to talk about Brexit today, but I read an interesting blog that linked coronavirus and Brexit,
Mm-hmm.
which I thought was interesting. I don't know if you remember, at the start of the week, I suggested that the countries with the highest number of COVID deaths looked a bit right-wing.
Yes.
From their various governments. This blog suggested that the people who were not obeying lockdown looked a bit Brexity, but then sort of drew back a bit by saying, well, actually, they fall into two categories. The Britain is the finest country in the world, Brexiteer, and we don't want to obey anybody's rules, Brexiteer. So his theory is that you'll find that the COVID deniers, I think he called them, will fall into two categories. Ones that obeyed the rules because Brits do that and it's the Blitz spirit and we all stick together. But they'll all be Brexiteers. And the other lot who are diving off cliffs on beaches. So the kind of political alignment I thought was quite amusing.
Aye.
Good writer, the boy, by the way. But I suppose we should give a breakdown of where we are. We're in the fourth negotiation period since January of the Brexit deal. This is the final one before we make or don't make the decision to extend the negotiation period for another year, I think has been floated, or 2 years. Still on the table are all the big questions. We'll lug fishing into the big questions because it's going to be a serious stumbling block, even though it doesn't even represent 1% of GDP. The other one is the alignment question, which is a huge question and very important to the EU because they essentially don't want the rules in the UK being so cut back that we get some sort of benefit financially in our production lines and can undercut them.
Well, that's their big worry, mate, isn't it? A sort of offshore tax haven type UK, undercutting standards, undercutting rules, and having a free trade agreement to pump anything that we can produce into the EU.
That effectively, and it looks like the Tory government have already decided they're prepared to cut standards in ag and fish, with their denial of the vote for the amendment that would have guaranteed standards.
Guaranteed standards in agriculture. Basically, I think when you look at, I don't think there'll be an extension, mate. I think that's a certainty. I think that'd be political suicide by Boris. But it's not as clear cut as they were presenting, in that they kind of said, but if there's nothing done by the end of June, then there will be nothing done. Certainly from the EU side, the Germans in particular are saying nothing's going to get done till September, October. There's a summit, I believe, October the 15th. And Angela Merkel's told Boris, there's a deal done then or there's no deal. So bottom line, mate, when you're you might be negotiating with Michel Barnier, but you're negotiating between the UK and Germany at this point. France maybe on the sidelines. The EU are sticking together. They ain't changing their views on anything, mate. And frankly, COVID's brought them even tighter together, particularly given the massive boosts that the European Central Bank and what have you, the infusion of money. I think it's now up to about 1.35 trillion or something, mate. So that's a lot of euros to be chucked around.
Well, they're talking about a fund of 200 billion just to help out the less well-off nations. One of the reasons we're discussing this is one of our viewers, Angela, asked us to reignite the Brexit argument. And one of the questions she asked was about whether the European Central Bank should cut interest rates in order to help Greece, Italy, etc. I don't think the European Central Bank will make that decision. That'll be made by Germany in effect.
I think, again, Germany's economy, although it's technically in recession, Germany's economy is still massive, and it's still the driver of a lot of the European economy.
And it'll become more important now that the UK's out.
Yeah. There's a couple of interesting wee things around it, mate. This what's going on in Hong Kong at the moment intrigues me. You know, that's almost 3 million Hong Kong passport holders that this government, who hates immigrants, and we know they hate immigrants because they've spent years chasing them away, they're willing to offer these people places in the UK.
Yeah,
now, they're not all rich, they're not all loaded.
They're the right kind of immigrant, Jimmy.
I know, mate. They've got money, and they're grafters.
Immigrants. They're buccaneers.
Aye. The problem, I read an interesting piece in The Spectator, and the boy was talking about creating a new Hong Kong in the United Kingdom, which should clearly be a disaster for the EU. But I got as far as about the third paragraph, and then he mentioned that this new Hong Kong would be out with London, and I thought, oh my God, you know nothing about the United Kingdom if you think the city of London would allow any other city in the UK to be a rival to it.
The problem with a new Hong Kong is the underclass in Hong Kong. There are people who literally are living in boxes. Yeah,
but they're not getting to come here, mate. So the 600,000 that can come now are all loaded. The other 2.3 million they're not loaded, but they're pretty minted.
But for it to function, they need a slave class. They need an underclass.
They've got that, mate.
They need all their wee cleaners, and
they've got that ready made here. They might know,
and they can't import them because they won't be getting paid 30,000 a year. Or was it 20,500 now?
There's enough poor people in the north of England, mate.
So,
and let's be honest, once they shut Nissan's factory in Sunderland, did you see that yesterday?
Aye.
It's only 2 weeks ago. Nissan said they were bringing going to be manufacturing 2 models for Renault at that factory, guaranteeing the jobs for 10 years. And then yesterday they said, aye, but remember, if there's a no-deal Brexit, that factory shuts about 3 months after the no-deal Brexit.
Yeah, and all these chickens will be coming home to roost. And I think, as we've said several times, the coronavirus is the camouflage that the Brexit ultras will be only too delighted to cover themselves in.
Yeah, do you think that just brought forward the Rolls-Royce decision to yesterday? Because that decision was clearly going to be made at some point, I think.
Yeah, and they're going to be able to say, oh, well, I know we said leaving the EU might be a good idea, but... So, will they stumble over fishing? Will that be the rod that breaks...
Aye.
The rod that breaks the EU's back?
I think fishing's such an emotive issue, mate. But to the EU, fishing's a business issue. I mean, you've got people in Holland, Spain, France. Now, the English sell their quota to these people. The folk in England that had big boats, they got massive grants from the EU to retire their boats. And then they sold their quota. So these people in Holland that have invested millions in quota and in boats, they need somewhere to fish. I'm not sure we'll get an agreement, mate. I don't think we'll get any kind of agreement on fish. I think it'll be an under the table, a nod and a wink kind of thing where a deal's done, where these big Dutch and Spanish boats will still fish in British waters. Because what's the alternative? It's not like we've got a navy to go and chase them away from our waters anymore.
Do you mean I thought we had 2 aircraft carriers just sitting waiting for something to do?
Aye, but an aircraft carrier can't be policing fishing grounds, mate. It costs us far too much money to fuel the aircraft carrier and get it to the fishing grounds. You need these fast MTVs and stuff like that. I would have to go to Iran to buy all the bloody boats to police that.
And we can't afford to give them Scottish oil to fill them because there's so little left. So
that's very true.
Fishing, not really important. I actually disagree with you. I think they'll throw fishing under the bus.
Aye.
They'll
It
make it
would be.
look like something else. What I think they'll end up doing is saying, right, the next 3 years of quota remain the same as, but after that, we row them back. So that 3 years down the line, they don't have to row them back. Nothing's changed. That's what I think will happen. There won't be
That brings.
an agreement that's called the same as the agreement we've got now. It'll be
Oh,
called
they'll call it
something else.
anything but the common fisheries policy, mate.
Aye. Well, I mean, I think what they'll do is they'll go to an annual negotiation which gets the UK government what it wants, and there'll be an agreement that annual negotiation can only alter 2% of, something like that. They'll fiddle the books.
I'm not so sure, mate. I genuinely think Scotland will be independent in 3 or 4 years anyway. So the whole fishing thing will be moot. If we go down the EFTA route, you've got us, Norway, and Iceland in EFTA, and it'll be EFTA that decides the entire fishing policy for the whole of Europe at that point.
Well, certainly, if we
Scotland
join
should.
EFTA with Norway, and there'll be an arc of fishing, if you like, with Iceland,
Exactly.
etc. We would have a lot of control. But it's a motive. It's not a huge part of anybody's GDP.
It's not, mate. No, I mean, you look at the big thing for London, and the big thing why they need a free trade agreement is financial services. It's the City of London that they need to have free access to Europe.
Not just financial services, services in general are a huge part of the agreement. And I was astonished at how little had actually been agreed. And it is because of fishing. Because the EU has stuck to the nothing's agreed till everything's agreed stance, which the British didn't.
Well, if we have no agreement whatsoever on fishing, that's why I think they'll just turn a blind eye if they can get away with it. I don't think the British government can reach an agreement. And if they can't reach an agreement on fishing, we're basically decimating the West Coast fishing fleets of Holland, Spain, and France. And I'm sorry, but you ken what the French will do. And the Dutch and the Spaniards will back them up on that. They'll just close every port for UK imports at that point. If their fishing industry's gone, they won't accept any UK imports.
Well, the other thing is the tariff and the time. I mean, the fishing industry isn't going to win out of this, isn't going to be any better off than it is now, even if it thinks it is. No. Because they're not going to be able to export their catch.
But that's the thing, mate. They were sold a pup, but they bit the head off that pup. They absolutely were sold a pup by the Brexit Party and the Tories that we could be an independent nation, an independent coastal state again. We can't be an independent coastal state and have a free trade agreement with the EU. The EU have made that 100% clear, and they won't move on that, I don't think.
And of course, there are international fishing agreements all over the world, purely and simply to try and keep stocks up, which we are signatories to.
That's my worry about the whole thing, mate. If it does become a free-for-all, are we just going to empty the North Sea in 4 or 5 years? Are we going to clear it everything because there's no quotas? You can slate the common fisheries policy.
We don't have the fishing fleet to do it.
We don't, but if it's a free-for-all, the Russians will be in there. You think for a second that Spain and France won't absolutely chuck state aid at their fishing fleet to get them out there and clear out as much of the UK fish as they want?
Be interesting.
If it's a free-for-all, mate, it's a nightmare. And it's a nightmare because as much as people hated the common fisheries policy, it worked on one specific point. The North Sea stocks are far better than they have been for, 30 years? They're way better now than they were 10, 15 years ago.
I suppose, that's the plus. If you cut the European fleets out of the North Sea and don't allow our fishing fleets to expand, I mean, I remember
Aye.
reading something about there's an area up off the west coast that they just completely banned any fishing in, thinking it would
Aye.
take 3 or 4 years to recover. And it had totally recovered within about 18 months, I think it was, a year to 18 months.
Yeah,
It happened a lot
there's
quicker than they thought it would.
there's been a couple, mate. As I say, the herring and the mackerel are back off the west coast in the kind of numbers that people thought they'd never see again.
Good stuff. Right. So, Dominic Cummings still in the riding seat. Do you think his survival is a hindrance to a deal, or?
I don't think he wants a deal, mate. I genuinely think he wants no deal. And I genuinely think Boris probably wants a deal, but is now at the point where he'd happily accept no deal, because I didn't want to say he's been bought, mate, but Boris's closeness to the likes of Crispin O'Day worries me, because O'Day's a disaster capitalist. He desperately wants no deal because it suits him, and his hedge fund make money hand over fist. You know what I mean? But I also think that if there's a no deal, it suits the hedge fund men, because the City of London will have a huge tremor run through it. And if the City of London panics, then the hedge fund guys will be like, bang, you can pick up that, and that.
The hedge funds are betting against the deal. But I look at Boris Johnson and I look at the deal he got, you know, the one that wasn't putting a border down the Irish Sea. And I wonder if this isn't really a question of spinning a deal to look like what they want as opposed to what it actually is. He seems prepared to basically bullshit his way out of anything.
Aye.
So will we end up with a deal that they try to make look better than it actually is?
I think that's been one of the most notable benefits to the country of this whole COVID pandemic, mate. With a lot of people's eyes have been open to just how much of a lying, cheating ballbag Boris is. I don't think we truly now can believe, one, that he was ill, or two, that he would ever sack Dominic Cummings, or ever. Dominic Cummings will go, mate, but Dominic Cummings will go when it suits Dominic Cummings to go.
I just think that, as I've said before, I think the fallout from this is really bad. I think it just means that they can do and say whatever they want. That truth is now no longer even an issue for them.
And in the worst, I mean, in the worst of all cases, they still will be able to point to America and say, look, at least we're not as bad as Donald. Boris is better than him. They've got till November to do that. So, as I say, that if the Germans are saying nothing's going to get done until September, October time, and if it's not done by the middle of October, then it won't be done. They've still be able to point at Donald. And can you imagine what will be going on through the summer and into October if Donald's still way behind in the polls in America? So they'll be able to do anything, because the front pages will be absolutely filled with the orange numpty going absolutely apoplectic because he's about to lose the presidency.
Yeah, well, I expect to see troops circling the White House in order to throw him out, hopefully.
There was genuinely somebody on, I don't think it was CNN, it was one of the other networks, mate, but there was genuinely somebody suggesting that if Donald Trump lost the election, he might not move out the White House. He might squat in there and say, no, I don't accept the result.
Nothing coming out of that man would surprise me at all. And the Republicans would sit on their hands and whistle while it was happening.
It'll be interesting.
Their reaction to this total incompetent is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder how long that defence secretary's got his job, eh? after coming out and basically saying that Trump was talking nonsense yesterday. He's
Well,
bound to lose his job today
good luck
or
to him.
tomorrow.
Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
People phoning me.
Well, you shouldn't have ordered that pizza till after 2:30, mate. You ken the score.
Anything that would surprise us about the negotiations? Well, apart from actually getting a deal before the end of June.
I wonder if Europe's willing to move. I do wonder that, as much as they say they're preparing for a no deal, Europe's never ever wanted that. I think, as I say, I think Britain probably does now. There's about 25% of this country who would support Boris, who would actually cheerlead Boris if he got a no deal. There's another 40% that would probably put up with it.
Well,
I don't think the numbers are the same in Europe. I think they do want a deal, and I think they may be prepared to move slightly, but I can't see them moving far enough on things. On things like fishing, I don't think they can move, mate.
Well, the polls are showing about 55% of people want an extension.
Right.
Now, if they want an excuse for an extension, they couldn't have a better one than COVID. For me, if they don't take an extension, I think that's the indicator that they do want a no deal.
I just can't see how he would. I'm not sure he'd be able to survive taking an extension, mate. I know that he has a majority of 80 in Parliament and everything, but there's still too many avid right-wingers in that party that would not allow him to take an extension. You know, there's an awful lot of people, even the new MPs, mate, who aren't powerful, but as a backbench Tory MP, you always have some power.
I don't think his cabinet would allow him.
And I didn't think the backbenchers would make an awful lot of these new MPs. They got elected on the back of get Brexit done, and to take an extension would automatically be seen as to taking an awfully big backward step about that. So I didn't think he can take one. And as you say, I think that looks at no deal. The idea that we're going to get a free trade agreement with no tariffs and still be allowed to be absolutely 100% sovereign is just for the birds. That's never going to happen. Well, Germans are going to tell you we'll have to give up some kind of sovereignty. And if it's going to be over fishing, it's going to have to be over other things.
But I do think fishing will be the area that will hit the headlines. But the level playing field is really, really important to the Europeans as well.
And if I'm honest,
exactly what the Brexiteers do not want.
It's hugely important to the Brexiteers. They don't want to be seen to, because any moves towards having a level playing field will be seen as weakness. Any moves towards, if you have a level playing field, you've then got to have the European courts overseeing that level playing field to make sure that you're not breaking the rules, and they can't have the European courts overseeing it. As
opposed to privately run multinational courts running a deal with America.
That's one of my worries, mate. That North American trade deal that we're going to make, that's going to supersede anything that comes out of Europe anyway, because there are too many people in the Tory party or around the Tory party or who fund the Tory party who see a future as the 51st state of America because it's profitable for them.
Which means they must be cutting the profit out of us.
Well, the thing is, mate, they didn't care. I mean, honestly, if that Nissan plant was to close tomorrow, that would devastate the northeast of England. That's not just the 9,000 jobs in Sunderland, it's the huge amount of jobs around it, people supplying goods to that plant. They don't care about the northeast of England because they've not got any money there. Let's be honest. Why do you think HS2 only runs to Manchester and Leeds? They didn't give a crap about anywhere north of there. That's the only place they've pumped money in over the last few years. If you've been to Manchester, my God, the redevelopment there. That money all came to London.
But why did people not realise? Was it just the fact that they bought the front pages of the Mail and the Sun and everybody except the Mirror and the Guardian?
To be honest with you, mate, Boris won Brexit and Boris won the election because he's Colonel Blimp. He's seen as an archetypal English type character, a bit of a bumbling fool, but he's a good Brit at heart and he'll look after us. People actually believe that nonsense.
Okay, enough Brexit. We'll come back to it, Angela, I promise.
Absolutely. Need to do a bit more homework, but it's definitely going to be a huge thing in the London press for the next few weeks for the next 3 weeks till we get to the end of June, because they're still sort of seeing this end of June as being a massive thing, and it really isn't, I don't think.
Well, I think we'll see headlines like Barnier sent home with his tail between his legs as headlines.
And you'll forgive me, mate, but they've made Barney out to be a bit of a donut and a bit of a daft old man, and he's anything but, judging by the fact that he's not budging, and the other 27 EU nations are standing as one.
Which is the way you win that kind of fight. Anything else catch your eye today?
Just while we're on that, mate, just as an aside, somebody released a figure. I think it was on Twitter that I seen it. But last year, 14,600 UK citizens obtained a German passport. And that's up from 500 in 2015. So in 4 years, 14,100 extra UK citizens wanted to be German. Do you think Brexit's the main driver for that, Norrie?
I think there's an outside chance it could be, Jimmy. It would be interesting to see a tally of the figures of the number of British passport holders that now have a European passport as well.
Aye, because there was a shed load that got Irish passports as well, wasn't there? Everybody that could claim an Irish granny was jumping for an EU Irish passport.
Unfortunately, I don't have an Irish granny.
Me neither.
Scots back for generations, or I would have applied. I would have. But there you go. That's interesting, though. Germans.
Aye, exactly. Well, having an EU passport's going to be a useful thing, mate. It looks like it might be the only way you'll get a bloody holiday over the next year or so anyway.
Do you think the Mail will run a headline of traitorous Brits get German passports?
I think that's the kind of story that the Mail would never, ever carry in 100 years, mate.
That'll be interesting. I'd like to see that. Okay. Thanks for coming on, Jimmy. And I hope Stuart's feeling a bit better tomorrow. I'm Norrie Stewart. I think we'll call it a day at that. Thanks for listening, folks. Feel free to ask us questions and we'll try and get you answers.
We'll talk nonsense around them.
And if we can't, we'll just bullshit because, we've been watching Boris. Okay, folks. Cheerio just now. We'll catch you later.